This video is audio content only. It does not contain any video footage or images. If you are expecting visual content, please be aware. This is intentionally provided in an audio-only format. We recommend listening to the audio rather than watching the screen. Thank you for your understanding. Welcome to our journey through the history of the Fundoshi. Beyond its role as a simple undergarment, the Fundoshi is a vital thread in the fabric of Japanese identity. In this narration, we will travel from the sacred rituals of antiquity and the bold fashion of the Edo period to its modern-day scientific revival. Discover how this humble cloth has represented spiritual resolve, physical health, and cultural pride for over a millennium. Let's unwrap the fascinating story of the sacred ties that continue to bind the Japanese spirit today. Chapter 1: Sacred Ties and the Spirit of Antiquity. To understand the story of the Fundoshi, we must look far back into the mists of Japanese antiquity, long before it was considered a simple piece of undergarment. In its earliest forms, this garment was a symbol of spiritual readiness, a badge of adulthood, and a vital component of sacred rituals. The history of the Fundoshi is essentially the history of the Japanese people's relationship with their own bodies and the divine. When we examine the artifacts of the Kofun period, which dates back roughly 1400 years, we find the first physical evidence of this garment. Archaeologists have unearthed haniwa, those distinct terracotta clay figures used in burial mounds, which depict men wearing what can only be described as a primitive form of the Fundoshi. Some of these figures represent powerful warriors or wrestlers, showing a garment that functioned as a sturdy wrap for the lower body. These haniwa figures don't just show us what people wore, they reveal that the concept of a specialized lower body wrap for physical exertion and ceremonial combat has been part of the Japanese identity since the dawn of its recorded civilization. Scholars of Japanese history generally divide the origins of the garment into two primary frameworks. The first is the Southern origin theory, or Nanpo Denrai Setsu, which suggests the design migrated from Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, where similar loincloths have been used for millennia in tropical climates. The second is the Continental theory, or Tairiku Denrai Setsu, which posits that the garment structure traveled from the Asian mainland via the Korean peninsula, evolving from more complex trousers into a streamlined wrap. Regardless of which path it took, by the time it was firmly established in the Japanese archipelago, it had become uniquely adapted to the local environment and spiritual landscape. As we move into the literary records of the Nara period, the Fundoshi appears in the most sacred texts of the nation, the Kojiki and the Nihonshoki. In these ancient chronicles, the garment is often referred to by terms like tafusagi or harabakama. The word tafusagi is particularly evocative, as it is thought to be derived from a phrase meaning calf nose, because the shape of the cloth, when tied, resembled the nose of an ox. This linguistic connection hints at a culture deeply rooted in the natural world, where even the most intimate items of clothing were described through the lens of the environment. In the Nihonshoki, there are even mythological accounts of deities being born from items of clothing. One such deity, Aki-gui no Kami, is said to have emerged from a discarded garment that researchers identify as a precursor to the Fundoshi or a form of hakama. This elevates the Fundoshi from a mere utility item to something with a divine pedigree, suggesting that the act of covering the body's core was a task charged with spiritual significance. The etymology of the word Fundoshi itself offers a window into the ancient Japanese mindset. While there are many theories, the most widely accepted one is that it comes from the phrase fumitoshi, which literally means stepping through. This refers to the specific way one would step into the loops of a garment that was structured more like a pair of trousers or a divided skirt, known as hakama. Over centuries, as the garment became more streamlined and shifted from an outer work garment to an inner layer, the pronunciation softened and evolved into the word we know today. Other scholars point toward the word hodashi, meaning to tie down or restrain, which reflects the garment's functional role in securing the body during labor or battle. There is even a theory suggesting a connection to the Korean word hantas, which points to the possibility of the garment's design traveling across the sea from the Asian mainland. Regardless of its exact linguistic root, the fundoshi has always been defined by the act of binding and securing the center of the human form. This sense of binding is not just physical, it is deeply spiritual. In the Japanese tradition, the lower abdomen, specifically the area known as the tendon, is believed to be the seat of a person's soul and the center of their physical energy. By tightening a fundoshi around this area, a person was thought to be concentrating their spirit and stabilizing their internal power. This is the origin of the famous Japanese expression kinkan ichiban, which means to tighten one's loincloth in preparation for a great challenge. It is the equivalent of buckling down or girding one's loins, but with a specific focus on the lower abdomen as the source of resolve. Even today, when a Japanese person says they are going to tighten their fundoshi, they are talking about a mental and spiritual realignment, a commitment to face a task with everything they have. The sacred nature of the fundoshi is perhaps most visible in the world of Shinto rituals and festivals. For centuries, the white fundoshi has been the standard attire for misogi, the act of ritual purification. When participants stand under the freezing waters of a mountain waterfall or plunge into the icy sea during the dead of winter, they wear nothing but a simple white cloth. In this context, the fundoshi represents a stripping away of the ego and the trappings of social status. To stand before the gods in a fundoshi is to present oneself in a state of primal purity. The color white is essential here, as it symbolizes the absence of defilement and a return to a clean, original state. This is why in many of Japan's famous naked festivals or Hadaka Matsuri, thousands of men gather wearing only their loincloths. It is a collective act of purification intended to ward off evil spirits and ensure the health and prosperity of the community for the coming year. One of the most profound roles the fundoshi played in traditional society was its function as a rite of passage. In many regions of Japan, a ceremony known as Fundoshi Iwai, or the Fundoshi celebration, was held to mark a boy's transition into manhood. This usually occurred around the age of 13, though it varied by locality. During this ritual, the boy would be presented with his first adult fundoshi, often made of fine white cotton or even silk if the family was wealthy. This wasn't a private family matter, it was a communal recognition of his new status. In some areas, a boy would be assigned a fundoshi oya, a sort of fundoshi godparent who was not a blood relative but a respected member of the community. This mentor would be the one to physically tie the garment onto the boy for the first time, symbolizing the transfer of adult responsibilities and the binding of the young man to the social fabric of the village. Once a boy had undergone this ceremony, he was no longer seen as a child. He was an adult capable of performing labor, participating in the defense of the community, and eventually starting a family. In the world of sumo, Japan's national sport, the fundoshi takes on its most elaborate and respected form, the mawashi. To a sumo wrestler, the mawashi is far more than a uniform. It is a sacred object that embodies the traditions of a sport that began as a Shinto ritual to entertain the gods and ensure a bountiful harvest. The construction of a mawashi is a feat of traditional craftsmanship. For a professional rikishi in the Kop divisions, the mawashi is made of heavy, high-quality silk, often several meters long and weighing up to 10 kilograms. It is folded and wrapped with such precision that it becomes a rigid, protective cage for the wrestler's midsection. The way a mawashi is handled is governed by strict taboos. Most notably, a rikishi's competition mawashi is never washed. It is believed that washing the garment would wash away the wrestler's strength, his luck, and the spirit he has built up through grueling practice. Instead, it is dried in the sun and brushed clean, allowing the sweat and salt of the ring to become part of its history. The rules of sumo also reflect the sacredness of the garment. There is a specific type of loss called fujomake, or unclean defeat. If a wrestler's mawashi should come undone during a match to the point where his genitals are exposed, he is immediately disqualified. This isn't just about modern standards of modesty. It is an ancient rule rooted in the idea that the sumo ring is a sacred space. To be exposed in such a way is to bring defilement into the circle where the gods are present. The garment must remain secure because the wrestler's dignity and the sanctity of the ritual depend on it. This highlights the Fundoshi's role as a guardian of the body's most vital and private parts, maintaining a boundary between the human and the divine. Sumo also preserves a unique decorative element of the ancient Fundoshi known as the sagari. These are the stiff, fringe-like strings that hang from the front of a wrestler's mawashi during his entrance and the start of a match. These strings are a vestigial remnant of the aprons that were once part of the garment in Antiquity. In modern sumo, the sagari are made of silk and hardened with a natural glue called funori. Interestingly, the number of strings in the sagari must always be an odd number, usually 13, 15, or 17. This is because even numbers are considered divisible and therefore unlucky in Japanese tradition, symbolizing a potential for the wrestler's strength to be split or for him to be pushed out of the ring. The sagari often fall off during the heat of a match, and you will see the referee, the joji, quickly pick them up and toss them aside. This is a practical move to prevent the wrestlers from tripping, but it also reflects the idea that the decorative elements are secondary to the core, binding cloth that holds the man together. Regional variations of the Fundoshi also highlight its deep roots in Japanese geography. While the standard term became dominant, local communities developed their own names and slight variations in style. In the Morioka region, the garment was often called kobakama, while in Hitachi it was known as teko. In Tokushima, one might hear the term tatera, and in Kochi it was referred to as fugome. In Sendai it was known as uchiobi, and in the mountains of Nagano it was called mokko. These regional identities show that the Fundoshi was not a monolithic invention imposed from the top down, but a living part of the local culture that adapted to the needs of the people using it. The material of the Fundoshi also carried significant meaning. Before the Edo period, when cotton became the dominant fabric of the common people, most Fundoshi were made of hemp or linen. Hemp was an incredibly important plant in ancient Japan, associated with strength, rapid growth, and purification. It was the same material used to make the sacred ropes in Shinto shrines. Wearing a hemp fundoshi was, in a sense, wrapping oneself in a protective, sacred fiber. When cotton was introduced and mass-produced, it changed the texture and comfort of the garment, making it more accessible to the masses, but the underlying spiritual intent remained the same. Even as the material changed, the act of wrapping a long, continuous piece of cloth around the body remained a constant. The color of the fundoshi was another powerful signifier. While white was the most common for its associations with purity, other colors were used for specific reasons. Red fundoshi, known as akafun, have a particularly storied history. In some eras, red was a color of high status, reserved for those of rank. In others, it was believed to have medicinal or protective properties. Divers and fishermen in certain parts of Japan were known to wear red fundoshi because they believed the color would ward off sharks, who were thought to be repelled by the vibrant hue. There is also a famous historical anecdote from the Gakushuin school, where the teachers wore white fundoshi while the students wore red. This served as a clear visual marker of the hierarchy between mentor and pupil. Even the current emperor of Japan, during his school days, was photographed participating in traditional long-distance swimming events wearing the signature red fundoshi of a student, showing how these traditions persisted into the modern imperial era. The fundoshi also played a role in the aesthetics of the human form. In ancient Japan, the garment was a badge of adulthood and physical readiness, defining the silhouette of the warrior and the laborer as figures of primal respect. This functionality was inseparable from the garment's spiritual weight. To be a man was to be bound, both physically by the cloth and socially by the obligations that the cloth represented. The fundoshi was a constant physical reminder of one's center. Unlike modern underwear, which is often loose and forgotten once put on, a traditional fundoshi requires a conscious effort to tie and provides a continuous tactile sensation throughout the day. This sensation served as an anchor, helping the wearer maintain their posture and their focus. It was a tool for mindfulness long before that term became popular. As we look at these ancient and sacred origins, we see a garment that was deeply integrated into every facet of life. It was there at birth, it marked the transition to adulthood, it protected the warrior in battle, it purified the worshiper in the shrine, and it defined the athlete in the ring. It represented a culture that did not see a divide between the physical and the spiritual, but rather saw the body as a vessel that must be properly bound and centered to function at its peak. This foundation of sacredness and pride allowed the fundoshi to dominate Japanese life for over a millennium. But as the nation moved toward a period of unprecedented internal peace and urban growth, how would this sacred wrap adapt to the flashy, status-conscious world of the rising merchant class? Chapter 2: Edo Pride and the Public Loincloth. As Japan transitioned from the brutal, chaotic centuries of civil war into the long peace of the Edo period, the fundoshi underwent a dramatic transformation. It moved from being a purely functional piece of military gear or a garment reserved for the elite and became the foundational garment of a vibrant, bustling urban society. In the streets of the shogun's capital, identity was forged in the smallest details of dress. While residents of the Kansai region in the west, the refined cities of Kyoto and Osaka, referred to the garment as fudoshi, the people of the Kanto region, centered in the shogun's seat of Edo, proudly used the sharper pronunciation fundoshi. This linguistic distinction was a point of regional pride, reinforcing the emergence of a unique Edo identity that was bold, direct, and sophisticated. The defining look of the Edo working man was a practice known as shiri hashori. Because the long flowing sleeves and skirts of a traditional kimono were impractical for physical work, men would take the hem of their outer garment and tuck it into their waist belt or obi. This exposed the legs and the buttocks, leaving the fundoshi as the primary visible layer of clothing from the waist down. For the carpenters, palanquin bearers, and street vendors of the era, this was not seen as a state of undress. Rather, it was a professional uniform. A man in shiri hashori was a man at work, a man contributing to the pulse of the city. The sight of a well-tied rokoshaku fundoshi, the classic 6-foot length of cloth, was a sign of competence and vigor. It showed that the wearer had the discipline to secure himself properly for the tasks at hand. This public visibility led to a unique cultural obsession with the aesthetics of the lower body. Because so much of the rear was on display, Edo-man became famously fastidious about their grooming. In the public sento, or bathhouses, which were the social hubs of every neighborhood, men would spend a significant amount of time caring for the skin of their buttocks and thighs. It was considered a matter of personal pride and public etiquette to have a clean, smooth appearance. This grooming extended to the management of body hair. It was a common social rule that pubic hair should not be allowed to peek out from the edges of the fundoshi. To manage this, bathhouses provided specialized tools like kei-kiri-ishi, or hair-cutting stones. These were pieces of light pumice that men would use to carefully rub away excess hair. For more stubborn areas, some would even use glowing sticks of incense to singe the hair away, a painful but necessary sacrifice for the sake of urban fashion. A man who neglected these details was looked down upon as unrefined, someone who did not understand the iki, the sophisticated, understated cool that defined Edo culture. The materials used for the fundoshi in this era became clear indicators of a person's place in the social hierarchy. Following the historical transition from hemp to mass-produced cotton, white bleached sarashi became the standard for the common people. It was durable, easy to wash, and provided the necessary grip for a secure tie. However, for the wealthy merchant class and the high-ranking samurai, cotton was often too pedestrian. These men of means turned to luxury fabrics to distinguish themselves. They would commission fundoshi made of fine silk, heavy brocade known as dansu, or chirimen, a delicate silk crepe with a distinct crimped texture. Some even wore rinzu, a polished satin weave silk. Even though these expensive fabrics were often hidden under layers of silk kimono, the knowledge that one was wearing a high-status material provided a sense of internal confidence and secret luxury. Color was another powerful tool for self-expression. While white remained the most common choice for its association with cleanliness, the Isamihara, the brave and flashy types like firefighters and street toughs, often opted for bold colors. Red was a particular favorite. A man wearing a red silk crepe fundoshi was signaling his vitality, his courage, and his willingness to stand out from the crowd. This choice also reflected the traditional belief in the medicinal and protective properties of the akafan, particularly its ability to keep the internal organs warm. Indigo, or navy blue, was also popular, especially among those who worked near the water or in trades where white cloth would stain too easily. Perhaps the most famous story regarding fundoshi color and status involves the founder of the shogunate himself, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Known for his extreme thriftiness and his focus on long-term stability, Ieyasu was said to be a devotee of earthy, undyed, or pale yellow-green tones for his loincloths. He argued that pure white cloth was a waste of money because it required constant, aggressive bleaching and washing to maintain its appearance, which caused the fabric to wear out prematurely. By using cloth dyed a light, natural yellow, he claimed that minor stains and the natural yellowing of age would be less noticeable, allowing the garment to last much longer. He went so far as to encourage his high-ranking retainers to adopt this pale yellow style as a sign of their commitment to a frugal, disciplined life. However, this was one area where even his most loyal samurai balked. For the warrior class, a pure white fundoshi was a symbol of their readiness to die at any moment. They believed that if they were killed on the battlefield, their body should be found in the cleanest, most honorable state possible. To wear a yellowed cloth was to look as if one had already given up on personal dignity. Despite the shogun's influence, the Mikawa warriors of his home province insisted on sticking to their brilliant white sarashi, proving that even in a military dictatorship, fashion and pride had their limits. As the period progressed and the pace of life in the city changed, a new style of fundoshi emerged that challenged the dominance of the 6-foot rakushaku. This was the echu fundoshi. While there are many theories about its origin, some say it was a gift given by the medicine peddlers of Toyama, others that it was invented by a clever courtesan in Osaka. Its design was a masterpiece of simplicity. Unlike the rakushaku, which was a single long strip that required a complex series of wraps and tucks, the echu consisted of a shorter rectangular cloth with a string attached to one end. The wearer would simply tie the string around his waist, pass the cloth between his legs, and tuck it over the front of the string. It was much faster to put on and take off, and it used significantly less fabric. The echu fundoshi quickly became the preferred choice for men who did not engage in heavy physical labor. Doctors, Buddhist monks, Shinto priests, and elderly men who had retired from active work found the echu to be much more comfortable and airy than the tight, restrictive wrap of the rakushaku. It provided a sense of ease and relaxation that suited a more sedentary or contemplative lifestyle. Over time, the type of fundoshi a man wore became a shorthand for his daily life. If you saw a man in a rakushaku, you knew he was a man of action, someone who might be called upon to carry a heavy load or run a long distance at a moment's notice. If he wore an echu, he was a man of the mind or a man of status, someone whose life was defined by stability rather than sweat.
The economics of the fundoshi in Edo were also quite fascinating. Despite being a basic necessity, a high-quality cotton fundoshi was not cheap. For the thousands of single men who flocked to Edo for work, the city famously had a massive gender imbalance. The daily chores of life could be a burden. Many of these men lived in cramped tenement houses known as nagaya, where space and resources for laundry were limited. Furthermore, for a proud samurai or a busy craftsman, the act of washing one's own underwear was often seen as a humbling or even humiliating task. This created a market for one of the most unique businesses of the Edo period, the sanryoya, or rental shop. These shops were the precursors to modern rental services, but they focused on everyday items like bedding, tea sets, and clothing. Surprisingly, one of their most popular items was the fundoshi. The economics of this trade were well documented. In the Bunkyu era, 1861 to 1864, a brand new cotton fundoshi could cost as much as 248 mon, a significant sum for a low-wage laborer. However, a man could go to a sanryoya and pay an exchange or rental fee of only 60 mon for a clean, used fundoshi. When the garment became dirty, he would simply return it to the shop and exchange it for a fresh one. The shop would then take the dirty laundry, wash it, and bleach it until it was crisp and white. It was a highly efficient system that allowed single men to maintain a high standard of cleanliness and iki without having to own a large wardrobe or spend their limited free time scrubbing cloth at a communal well.
The fundoshi also played a critical role in the world of Edo entertainment, particularly in the kabuki theater. Kabuki was the pop culture of the day, and the actors were the era's biggest celebrities. On stage, the fundoshi was used as a powerful visual cue to tell the audience about a character's personality. The color and style were strictly codified. White was reserved for the dignified samurai roles, signaling purity and a readiness for death. A vibrant red signaled the iki leads, the dashing heroes and handsome lovers who captured the audience's heart. Meanwhile, common townspeople and lower-class characters were often depicted in a simple triangular white cloth, a more minimalist and functional wrap. When an actor performed a mie, a dramatic frozen pose intended to capture the character's intense emotion, he would often hitch up his kimono to reveal his fundoshi. This was a moment of peak otokoburi, or masculine beauty. It was intended to show that the character was a real man, someone who was grounded, powerful, and ready for whatever drama was about to unfold. These stage performances influenced the fashion of the streets, as young men would try to emulate the specific ties and colors used by their favorite actors. Even in the most private moments of life, the fundoshi had its own set of rules. During the Edo period, the concept of a furo fundoshi, or bath loincloth, was standard practice. It was considered impolite to enter a public bath completely naked. Instead, men would wear a specific fundoshi made of thin, quick-drying material into the water. As they bathed, they would use the cloth to scrub themselves, and upon leaving the water, they would wring it out and use it to partially dry their bodies, before switching back to their dry, daily fundoshi. This practice of the furo fundoshi remained the standard of public etiquette until the Horeki-era, 1751 to 1763, after which the culture became more comfortable with full nudity in the bathhouse. This timeline highlights just how deeply the fundoshi was integrated into the Japanese sense of propriety for the majority of the era. A man was rarely without his cloth. It was his constant companion from the moment he woke up until he went to sleep. The garment also served as a marker of social transition within the city's rigid apprenticeship system. While rural areas maintained their own traditions, in the urban landscape of Edo, the fundoshi iwai was observed as early as age 9 to mark a boy's transition toward adulthood, signaling to the community that he was beginning his journey toward becoming a full-fledged Edo-ko, or child of Edo.
In this urban landscape, the fundoshi was far more than just a piece of fabric. It was the thread that tied together a man's physical health, his professional identity, and his social standing. It allowed the laborer to move with grace and power, the merchant to enjoy a hidden luxury, and the actor to project a larger-than-life masculinity. The people of the Edo period did not see the fundoshi as a source of embarrassment. They saw it as a source of strength and a canvas for style. It was a garment that celebrated the human form in its most active and honest state.
This era represented the absolute peak of the Fundoshi's cultural dominance, a time when the entire nation was bound by the same strips of cotton and silk. Yet, even as the Iki spirit reached its zenith, the black ships of the West were appearing on the horizon. The public pride of the Edo man was about to collide with a foreign gaze that viewed his traditional attire not as a symbol of status, but as a mark of the uncivilized. How would a society built on the visibility of the loincloth respond when told that its most foundational garment was a source of international shame? The transition from the Edo period to the Meiji era was a seismic shift in the Japanese soul, and nowhere was this more visible than in the sudden forced evolution of the nation's clothing. For centuries, the Fundoshi had been a symbol of work, status, and masculine pride. But as the 19th century drew to a close, this ancient garment found itself at the center of a profound cultural collision. As Japan opened its doors to the world, it was forced to see itself through the eyes of the Westerners who were arriving in increasing numbers. To these visitors, the sight of men working in the streets, pulling carts, or carrying goods while wearing nothing but a strip of white cloth was not a display of professional vigor. Instead, they saw a shocking lack of modesty and a sign of a backward, uncivilized society. This external judgment quickly internalized within the Japanese elite. The government's response was swift and legalistic. In November of 1872, the governor of Tokyo issued the Ishiki Kaishi Jorei, a set of ordinances designed to regulate public behavior. The edict was a direct response to the civilization and enlightenment movement, and it specifically targeted the traditional loincloth. The official sentiment was clear. The sight of exposed buttocks was what specifically horrified foreigners and hindered Japan's acceptance as a modern peer nation. It became a punishable offense to walk outside wearing only a fundoshi. This was the moment the public fundoshi began its long retreat. The police were tasked with enforcing these new standards, and the working men who had spent their lives in the mobility of the loincloth were suddenly forced into trousers to avoid arrest. The cultural clash extended even to the water. During the Meiji and Taisho eras, the traditional fundoshi was deemed inappropriate for swimming in the presence of Westerners. This led to the creation of the zebra swimsuit, or shimama. These were one-piece, striped garments that covered the torso and thighs, serving as a modest bridge between the traditional loincloth and Western swimwear. It was a literal manifestation of the era's struggle to cover the Japanese body in a way that satisfied the Victorian gaze. However, a strange paradox emerged. Even as the government was banning the fundoshi in public to appease Western sensibilities, it was simultaneously embedding the garment into the heart of the new Western-style military. When the conscription law was enacted in 1873, the fundoshi became a requirement of the state. During the mandatory physical examinations, codified in the Army Physical Examination Rules, recruits were ordered to strip down to their fundoshi so military doctors could conduct checks of the groin and genitals. In this clinical environment, the garment was a tool of state-sanctioned health and fitness. The military's relationship with the fundoshi was deeply ideological. While soldiers wore Prussian-style uniforms on the outside, the leadership believed their inner spirit must remain purely Japanese. The white echu fundoshi, a simplified design known for its efficiency, became the inner uniform of the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy. It was seen as a way to maintain Yamato damashi, or the Japanese spirit, beneath the veneer of westernization. Young men from westernized cities were forced to revert to the fundoshi upon entering the barracks to remove the civilian air and instill traditional discipline. In the Imperial Japanese Navy, the fundoshi even became a matter of strategic security. A strict no-disposal rule was enforced, forbidding sailors from throwing their fundoshi overboard. Because the garments were unique to Japan and did not sink easily, floating white cloths could alert enemy vessels to the presence and direction of the Japanese fleet. The garment was, quite literally, a military liability if handled improperly. This military enforcement kept the Fundoshi dominant for decades. It became so synonymous with the military experience that by the 1930s it had taken on a dual identity. To the younger generation, it was a symbol of regimented life, while to the older generation it remained a link to their youth. This cultural persistence occasionally led to moments of international fascination. During the 1936 Berlin Olympics, Japanese swimmers were observed wearing their fundoshi during practice sessions. Foreign journalists were so captivated by the sight that they speculated the garment was the secret to the athletes' incredible speed. This led to a flurry of requests for commemorative photos, as the Western world briefly viewed the shameful loincloth as a high-performance mystery. The 1930s also saw a broader debate about modesty and safety following the 1932 Shirokiya department store fire, which accelerated the shift toward Western-style underwear. The end of World War II in 1945 brought the most devastating blow to the fundoshi's status. With the arrival of the Allied occupation, the garment was once again subjected to the foreign gaze, but this time with the weight of military defeat. The GHQ viewed the fundoshi with deep suspicion, branding it the underwear of the patriotic fanatic or the unreconstructed imperialist. To the occupiers, the loincloth was a lingering symbol of the militarism they were determined to eradicate. In the post-war years, the Japanese people were eager to distance themselves from the trauma of the war. As Western-style clothing became the absolute standard, the fundoshi was increasingly seen as an embarrassing relic. The linguistic shift during this time was telling. The word fundoshi itself began to be treated as a vulgarity. It was replaced by euphemisms like shitabi, underbelt, to avoid the direct term. The garment that had once been a source of iki, the sophisticated, understated cool of the Edo period, was now labeled dasai, or hopelessly uncool. This flip from one extreme to the other marked the fundoshi's transition from a national garment to a source of social anxiety. To combat this declining image, the retail industry attempted a bold rebranding. In 1965, the Mitsukoshi department store launched high-quality fundoshi, but realized the name was a marketing liability. They chose to call the garment classic pants, a use of wasei eigo, Japanese-made English, intended to give the loincloth an air of dignified Western-style tradition. The strategy was to make the purchase feel like a choice of classic style rather than a stubborn adherence to an obsolete custom. The decline was so steep that by the late 20th century, the fundoshi had largely disappeared from daily life, surviving primarily as a costume in sumo and traditional festivals. The cultural clash of the Meiji era and the post-war occupation had succeeded in transforming a national symbol of pride into a source of private embarrassment. Yet even at its lowest point, the fundoshi never quite vanished. The very qualities that had made it a target for Western reformers, its honesty about the human form and its rejection of complexity, would eventually become the foundation for a modern revival. This shift began to manifest in unexpected ways, moving from the realm of military discipline into the worlds of personal health, where the shame of the past was slowly replaced by a new kind of curiosity. But as the men of Japan were navigating this transition, a parallel and equally complex history was unfolding for the women of the nation. Chapter 4: The Unbound Spirit, Women and the Loincloth. While the popular image of the fundoshi is overwhelmingly masculine, often associated with the grit of a sumo ring or the sweat of a traditional festival, there is a parallel history that is just as old and deeply rooted in the Japanese experience. For centuries, women have had their own unique relationship with this garment, a relationship that has shifted between the sacred, the practical, the scandalous, and the medicinal. To understand the full scope of the fundoshi's cultural weight, we must look past the public displays of manhood and uncover the hidden history of how Japanese women utilized, adapted, and eventually reclaimed this simple strip of cloth. The earliest records of women wearing the fundoshi appear in the same foundational texts that define the nation's origins. In the Nihon Shoki, there is a striking account during the reign of Emperor Yuryaku involving female sumo. The text describes women stripping off their outer garments to tie on fundoshi and engage in wrestling matches for the entertainment of the court. This indicates that even in the 8th century, the fundoshi was understood as a functional tool for female physical exertion, not an exclusively male domain. While women's everyday undergarments in ancient times were more likely to be simple waist wraps known as koshimaki, the fundoshi was the specialized gear for moments of intense activity or ritual performance.
As Japanese society moved into the Edo period, a clear distinction began to emerge between male and female undergarments, but it was a distinction based more on shape and visibility than a total abandonment of the loincloth concept. Most urban women of the Edo era wore the yumoji, a rectangular piece of bleached cotton or silk wrapped around the hips like a short underskirt. This transition into womanhood was marked by specific regional rituals. In Fukuoka, for instance, 7-year-old girls celebrated a rite of passage known as yumoji kaki. This was the first time a young girl would wear adult-style undergarments, signaling her growth and her integration into the gendered expectations of her community. It was a moment of pride, mirroring the male fundoshi awai, and established the yumoji as a foundational element of a woman's identity. However, the reality of undergarments varied wildly between the city and the countryside. In many rural farming villages, the concept of undergarments was often non-existent. For many laboring women, wearing nothing at all beneath their work robes or kimonos was the norm until the modern era. In these communities, the sight of a woman bending over in the fields and inadvertently exposing herself was considered a peaceful, everyday scene, devoid of the sexualized or shameful connotations that would later be imposed by Western standards of modesty. This commando lifestyle was a matter of pure practicality and thermal regulation during backbreaking labor in the sun.
For women in specialized professions, the fundoshi remained essential equipment. For the ama, the traditional skin divers of Japan's coastal regions, the garment was a professional necessity. In Ishikawa Prefecture, specifically on Hegura Island, female divers were a specialized version known as the saiji. This was a remarkably minimalist piece of clothing, essentially a tea-back-style echu fundoshi. The front section was a small triangle of sashiko, or reinforced quilted cloth, while the rest was reduced to a simple rope-like string to minimize water resistance and allow for maximum movement in the depths of the ocean. These women divers were symbols of health and economic independence, and their use of the fundoshi was a matter of unashamed utility. Perhaps the most significant but least discussed role of the fundoshi in women's history was its use as a sanitary belt. Long before the invention of modern adhesive pads, women relied on the structural principles of the fundoshi to manage their menstrual cycles. In this context, the garment was often referred to by the euphemism o-uma, or the horse. This name likely came from the way the cloth was straddled, much like mounting a horse. During their periods, women would use an echu or moko fundoshi to secure layers of recycled paper or folded cloth against their bodies. In rural areas, women who did not have access to specialized cloths would use soft plant fibers or even specially prepared moss for absorption, all held in place by the reliable binding of the loincloth. Because menstruation was historically viewed through the lens of kegare, or spiritual impurity, this functional necessity was rarely documented, remaining a private, shared knowledge among women.
The world of entertainment also provided a stage for the female fundoshi. From the Edo period through the early post-war years, onna sumo, or female sumo troops, were a popular form of traveling spectacle. These women wrestlers were powerful athletes whose attire was a direct mirror of the male rikishi's mawashi. Similarly, in the world of taishu engeki, or popular theater, female actors playing male roles or brave warriors would perform sword fights with their kimonos hitched up. To heighten the aesthetic impact, these actors would apply oshiroi, or white face powder, to their inner thighs.
This created a stark, appealing contrast with the vibrant red of the fundoshi during the dynamic movements of a fight. The red color was associated with warding off evil and protecting the wearer's health, making it a powerful visual shorthand for resolve and vitality.
The decline of the fundoshi for women followed a trajectory similar to that of men, but with a unique catalyst. While the Meiji government's push for civilization encouraged the adoption of Western-style bloomers, the real turning point for many urban women was the Great Shirokiya department store fire of 1932. Several women trapped on the upper floors hesitated to jump into safety nets because they were wearing traditional kimonos with only a yumoji underneath, fearing the wind would expose them to the crowds below. This tragic event became a powerful argument for the adoption of the zurosu, or Western-style drawers, which provided more coverage. By the time the Second World War began, the government's mandate for women to wear mampe, or functional work trousers, made the traditional waist wrap even more impractical. After the war, the rapid influx of American fashion meant that the fundoshi almost entirely vanished from the female wardrobe. However, the late 1980s saw a sudden re-entry of the female fundoshi into the public eye through the lens of high-impact photography and idol culture. In 1989, the popular actress Rie Miyazawa released a calendar that featured her wearing a traditional fundoshi, highlighting the contrast between the rugged garment and her delicate frame. Around the same time, Kumiko Takeda became famous for her bold shots featuring a shell-decorated fundoshi. These images reframed the garment as something daring and exotic. While these depictions were primarily intended for the male gaze, they inadvertently reopened the conversation about the fundoshi as a garment that women could wear with confidence.
This aesthetic rediscovery eventually paved the way for a practical and health-conscious movement in the early 21st century. This is the era of the fundoshi joshi, or fundoshi girls. This modern trend is not about looking like a sumo wrestler. It is about the physiological benefits of traditional construction. Many women began to realize that modern underwear, with its tight elastic bands, was contributing to issues like poor circulation and chronic coldness. The fundoshi, by design, has no elastic, relying instead on the tension of the cloth. Major manufacturers took notice of this shift. In 2008, the lingerie brand Une Nana Cool released a line of women's fundoshi called Nana Fun. To the company's surprise, the product was an immediate hit, selling over 10,000 units in its initial run. These modern versions often took the form of a moko fundoshi, which looks much like a standard pair of panties from the front and back, but uses side ties instead of elastic. This allowed women to adjust the fit perfectly to their own bodies, providing a sense of freedom that was previously unknown in modern undergarments.
The normalization of the garment was further aided by high-profile enthusiasts. The actress Ikue Masudo, also known as Saya Takagi, helped popularize the DIY aspect of the movement by publicly stating that she hand-makes her own fundoshi. This helped shift the image of the garment from a mass-produced item to a personalized craft, encouraging women to choose their own fabrics and patterns. This cultural momentum has been recognized by the Japan Fundoshi Association through its Best Fundoshist Award, which has been won by prominent women such as the entertainer Mitsu Dan and the model Aya Kiguchi. These awards celebrate women who prioritize their own comfort and health over societal expectations. Because the word fundoshi still carries a certain stigma for some, many modern retailers use the term pondoru shorts. Pondoru is a Japanese take on the French word pondre, meaning to hang or to dangle, referring to the front flap of the etchu style. This rebranding has helped make the garment more accessible, and it is now available in a dizzying array of natural fabrics like organic cotton, linen, and silk. Some designs even include innovative features, like a small pocket over the sacrum designed to hold a disposable heat pack, adapting the traditional belief that keeping the lower back warm is essential for female health.
The modern female fundoshi movement has also fostered a unique interest in keiketsu control, or menstrual blood control.
This is a technique where a woman learns to use her pelvic floor muscles to hold blood until it can be released in the toilet. Enthusiasts of this practice often advocate for the fundoshi or yumoji as the ideal undergarment, as it encourages a greater awareness of the pelvic region and doesn't provide the safety net of a highly absorbent, restrictive pad, thereby forcing the body to rely on its own natural rhythms. Even in more niche subcultures, the female fundoshi has maintained a presence. In the world of Japanese bondage and SM culture, the act of a woman being bound in a tightly tied rokoshaku fundoshi is a recurring theme. In this context, the garment is used to explore themes of narcissism and the eroticism of restriction. The intense pressure of a properly tied 6-foot cloth provides a unique physical sensation that is used for both psychological and physical stimulation. While this is a far cry from the health-conscious nighttime trend, it shows the incredible versatility of the garment and its ability to tap into the deepest levels of the human psyche.
The story of women and the fundoshi is ultimately a story of reclamation. It is the story of a garment that was once a common tool for labor and a private necessity for health, which was then branded as shameful, only to be rediscovered as a powerful instrument for modern wellness. It challenges the idea that traditional clothing is a step backward, suggesting instead that the designs of the past contained a sophisticated understanding of human physiology. As more women choose to unbind themselves from the elastics of the 20th century, they are not just changing their underwear, they are reconnecting with a lineage of strength and practicality that stretches back to the very beginning of Japanese history. This shift toward functional freedom raises a compelling question. If the simple removal of elastic can have such a profound impact on a woman's daily well-being, what other forgotten wisdom is waiting to be uncovered in the folds of traditional attire?
Chapter 5: The Science of Freedom, a Modern Loincloth Renaissance.
As we move into the 21st century, the fundoshi is undergoing its most significant transformation yet. It is no longer being viewed through the lens of ancient ritual or nationalistic pride, nor is it being dismissed as a shameful relic of a less civilized past. Instead, a new generation of researchers, medical professionals, and environmental advocates are looking at this simple strip of cloth and seeing a remarkably sophisticated solution to some of the most persistent health and ecological challenges of modern life. The revival of the fundoshi today is driven by the science of the human body and a growing awareness of the need for sustainable living, moving the garment from the fringes of subculture back into the mainstream of wellness. The primary scientific argument for the fundoshi lies in its radical departure from the construction of modern underwear. Almost all contemporary undergarments, whether they are briefs, trunks, or panties, rely on elastic bands to stay in place. These bands are typically situated around the waist and, more importantly, around the leg openings. From a physiological perspective, these elastics are positioned exactly where they can do the most harm to the body's natural circulation. The area where the legs meet the torso, known as the inguinal region, is a critical junction for the human circulatory and lymphatic systems. It contains major arteries, veins, and a dense network of lymph nodes that are responsible for moving fluids and filtering toxins throughout the lower half of the body.
Medical observations have shown that even relatively light, constant pressure from elastic bands can act like a series of tiny tourniquets, subtly but persistently restricting the flow of blood and lymph. This constriction is a major contributor to a condition known as hisho, or chronic coldness in the hands and feet, which plagues a significant percentage of the modern population. When the blood flow to the extremities is hindered at the groin, the body struggles to regulate its internal temperature effectively. By switching to a fundoshi, which uses the tension of the fabric rather than the squeeze of elastic, the pressure on the inguinal region is eliminated. Enthusiasts and medical proponents report that this simple change allows for a dramatic improvement in peripheral circulation, often leading to a natural rise in skin temperature and a reduction in the sensation of coldness. The benefits of this inguinal liberation extend beyond simple temperature regulation. Improved circulation and the restoration of autonomic nerve balance have been linked to relief from more systemic issues, such as chronic constipation and shoulder stiffness. When the lower abdomen and groin are free from the constant elastic stress of modern waistbands, the parasympathetic nervous system can function more effectively. This shift promotes better gut motility and reduces the unconscious muscular tension in the upper body that often leads to persistent knots in the shoulders and neck. By addressing the constriction at the body's center, the Fundoshi facilitates a holistic state of physical ease.
The lymphatic system also thrives in the absence of constriction. Unlike the heart, which pumps blood, the lymphatic system relies on body movement and the lack of external pressure to circulate lymph fluid. Constrictive underwear can cause this fluid to pool in the legs, leading to edema or swelling. Many modern wearers of the Fundoshi, particularly those who spend long hours sitting at desks or standing, report a significant decrease in leg fatigue and swelling by the end of the day. This isn't just about comfort, it is about supporting the body's fundamental mechanical processes. The Fundoshi represents a return to a state where the clothing works with the body's anatomy rather than against it. In the realm of dermatology and hygiene, the Fundoshi offers a rational solution to the challenges of a humid climate. Japan's summers are notoriously muggy, creating an environment where moisture and heat are trapped against the skin by tight-fitting synthetic underwear. This creates a perfect breeding ground for bacteria and fungi, leading to common issues like heat rash, contact dermatitis, and tinea cruris. The structure of the Fundoshi allows for constant airflow. Because the fabric is not sealed against the skin by elastic, moisture can evaporate quickly, keeping the delicate skin of the groin dry and cool. This breathability is a key reason why many people who suffer from chronic skin irritation find immediate relief when they adopt traditional cotton or linen loincloths.
This hygiene factor is also a major reason why the Fundoshi has never truly left the medical field. In Japanese hospitals and clinics, a specialized version of the Echu Fundoshi, known as the Tiji tie or tea bandage, remains a standard item. While it is essential for post-operative care, providing support for surgical dressings without restrictive elastics, it is also a standard medical garment for post-childbirth maternity care. Its design allows medical staff to manage a patient's needs with minimal movement of the legs, which is crucial for recovery. The fact that modern medicine still relies on this ancient design for both surgical and maternity wards is a powerful testament to its functional perfection. The science of sleep has also become a major battleground for the Fundoshi revival. Sleep researchers have long noted that the body needs to drop its core temperature slightly to enter deep restorative sleep. Tight underwear can interfere with this natural cooling process. This has led to the rise of the nighttime Fundoshi trend. Many people find that the Fundoshi provides the perfect middle ground. The psychological comfort of being covered combined with the physiological benefits of total freedom from constriction. Wearers frequently report falling asleep faster and experiencing fewer instances of waking up during the night, which they attribute to the lack of tactile reminders of a tight waistband. The psychological impact of the Fundoshi is often described through the concept of the tenden. The act of consciously tying the cloth around one's midsection provides a subtle, constant stimulation to this area. Many users report that this leads to improved posture and a greater sense of mental focus. It is a form of wearable mindfulness that encourages the wearer to stay connected to their physical center throughout the day. The modern revival is being championed by organizations like the Japan Fundoshi Association, officially established in 2011. This group has moved away from the 1965 classic pants rebranding and has embraced the name Fundoshi with a mix of humor and high-minded purpose. Their mission is to normalize the garment for a new generation, promoting it as a cool and healthy choice for the modern citizen. One of their most successful initiatives is the Best Fundoshist Award, given annually to celebrities who have helped raise the profile of the garment.
The history of the award began in the 2011-2012 season, with the first grand prize winner being Dancho Yasuda of the comedy trio Yasuda Dai Circus. By associating the Fundoshi with popular and successful people, the association is successfully stripping away the old man stigma and replacing it with an image of health-conscious sophistication.
The association has also been clever in its use of the calendar to weave the garment back into the fabric of daily life. They successfully lobbied to have February 14th officially recognized as Fundoshi Day by the Japan Anniversary Association in 2011. While the rest of the world celebrates Valentine's Day with chocolate, the Japan Fundoshi Association encourages people to gift fundoshi to their loved ones as a gesture of caring for their health. This play on words, 2 for fu, 10 for to, and 4 for shi, has turned a potential marketing conflict into a unique cultural moment. Building on this, the association proposed March 14th as Fundoshi Gaeshi Day, or Fundoshi Return Day. In a notable promotion, they even partnered with a company in Nagasaki to give cookies to those who purchased fundoshi on that day, mirroring the White Day tradition of returning a gift with a sweet treat. Beyond these spring dates, the association has also officially recognized August 20th as No Pan Day, or No Pants Day. This is not a call for public indecency, but rather a playful and provocative encouragement for people to spend time at home completely free from the constriction of any underwear at all. By experiencing the sheer physical relief of no pan, the association hopes to guide people toward the fundoshi as the only garment that can replicate that sense of total freedom while still providing the necessary coverage for daily life. It serves as an annual reminder that the body functions best when it is allowed to breathe and move without the constant pressure of elastic. The industrial side of the revival is equally fascinating. New brands like SHARFU have emerged, focusing on high-end materials and ethical production. These brands often shun the cheap, mass-produced cotton of the past in favor of premium linen or ama. Linen is an ideal material for undergarments because it is highly absorbent, quick-drying, and possesses natural antibacterial properties. It also becomes softer and more comfortable with every wash, making the fundoshi a long-term investment rather than a disposable commodity. Many of these modern fundoshi are produced in small factories in regions like Fukushima, where the industry provides much-needed economic support for communities recovering from natural disasters. This connection between a traditional garment and regional revitalization adds a layer of social responsibility to the act of buying underwear. Sustainability is perhaps the most modern argument in the fundoshi's favor. We live in an era of fast fashion, where inexpensive clothing is produced in massive quantities, often using synthetic materials that shed microplastics into the water supply and take centuries to decompose in landfills. The fundoshi is the ultimate slow fashion item. It is, at its core, a single rectangular piece of natural fiber. It requires far less energy to produce than complex multi-piece underwear. Because it has no elastic, it doesn't lose its shape or functionality when the rubber perishes, which is the primary reason most modern underwear is eventually discarded. A well-made linen or cotton fundoshi can last for years, and when it finally does wear out, it is fully biodegradable.
This environmental logic appeals to a growing demographic of LOHS, lifestyles of health and sustainability consumers. For these individuals, the fundoshi is more than a health choice. It is a political and ethical one. It represents a rejection of unnecessary complexity and a return to a zero-waste philosophy. The simplicity of the design also encourages a return to self-sufficiency. People are discovering the satisfaction of creating their own intimate apparel, choosing their own fabrics, and tailoring the fit to their specific needs, moving away from the cycle of constant consumption. The versatility of the modern fundoshi is reflected in the variety of styles now available. While the rokushaku remains the choice for festivals and those seeking maximum support, the echu and mako styles have been adapted for daily wear under modern clothing.
These designs often feature a more familiar shape, but retain the side ties and the absence of leg elastic. This makes them virtually invisible under trousers or skirts while providing the circulatory benefits of the traditional tie. Some manufacturers have even introduced samurai pants that use Velcro or specialized snaps instead of ties, catering to those who want the health benefits but struggle with the traditional knots.
The internationalization of the Fundoshi is another unexpected trend. As Japanese culture continues to exert a powerful influence globally, people outside of Japan are beginning to discover the garment. It has found a following among yoga practitioners and athletes who value the range of motion it provides. In the global gay community, the Rokushaku Fundoshi has become a popular item of expressive fashion, celebrated for its bold aesthetic and its connection to a rugged, traditional masculinity. This cross-cultural adoption is stripping the Fundoshi of its purely nationalistic associations and reframing it as a unique piece of world heritage that offers universal benefits. For those who have made the switch permanently, the experience is often described as a point of no return. Long-term wearers speak of a profound change in their relationship with their own bodies. They describe the ease of use in daily life and the sheer comfort of never feeling squeezed. They argue that the initial learning curve of the knots is a small price to pay for a lifetime of improved health and comfort. The Japan Fundoshi Association has articulated a bold vision for the future, the 120 million people total Fundoshification plan. While this goal is stated with a wink, the underlying message is serious. They believe that if every person owned at least one Fundoshi, even if only for use as relaxing homeware or for sleeping, the collective impact on the nation's health and environmental footprint would be substantial. In this modern context, the Fundoshi has come full circle. It began as a sacred binding of the spirit, became a public display of status and work, was hidden away in shame, and has now emerged as a scientifically backed tool for personal and planetary health. It is a rare example of a traditional object that has survived the onslaught of modernization, not by becoming a museum piece, but by proving its continued relevance in the most intimate areas of human life. The Fundoshi reminds us that sometimes the most effective way to move forward is to look back at the simple, honest solutions that served our ancestors for over 1,000 years. This ongoing journey of the loincloth continues to evolve as it meets the needs of a changing society, prompting us to wonder what other ancient designs might hold the key to our future well-being. The history of the Fundoshi is a journey from sacred antiquity and Edo period pride to a modern health renaissance. It is more than just a garment. It is a thread connecting Japan's spiritual roots with contemporary wellness. By shedding the shame of once imposed Western standards, we rediscover a design that respects both human physiology and the environment. The Fundoshi's persistence suggests that true progress often involves reclaiming the wisdom of our ancestors. As we navigate a complex world, perhaps the secret to our well-being lies in returning to our center and unbinding ourselves from the unnecessary constraints of modern life. What other forgotten traditions are waiting to be retied into our daily lives? Thank you for listening to this exploration of the Fundoshi's history and its enduring spirit.